Hello guys, it's nice to have you back. Welcome back, and those who are new, we are discussing the fundamentals of computing in this channel. In our previous video, we covered few basics of computing. We looked into the definition of computers. We discussed the characteristics of computers. We also went through the advantages and disadvantages of computers, and we finished by going through the application areas of computers. I would like you to go back and refer to the past video, and you'll have an idea of what we learned on our previous video. In this video, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to learn through the components of a computer. We have three main components of a computer. We have the hardware, the software, and the liveware. Computer hardware. Hardware is simply the tangible parts of a computer, the mechanical parts of a computer, parts that can be touched and felt. For example, we have the monitors, the keyboards, the mouse, the motherboard, the memory modules, and the disk drive. We can further divide computer hardware into two, that is, the internal hardware and the external hardware. What is internal hardware? Internal hardware simply refers to the hardware found inside the system unit. You can ask yourself, what is a system unit? A system unit is simply a casing that contains electronic components of a computer. It houses the internal hardware of a computer. An example of internal hardware housed inside the system unit is the motherboard. All internal hardware are connected to the motherboard by either expansion slots or connected via ribbon cables. You can ask yourself once again, what is a motherboard? Now, a motherboard is the main printed circuit board in a computer. The motherboard is the computer's central communication backbone connectivity point. It is in this point through which all components and external peripherals connect to. For example, if you want to connect any hardware to the motherboard, you connect it through an expansion slot. Let's say you wanted to install a new video card into the computer. You'd purchase a video expansion card and install that card into the compatible expansion slot. Let's ask ourselves, what is an expansion slot? An expansion slot is also called a bus slot or an expansion port. An expansion slot is a connection or a port inside the computer on the motherboard that provides an installation point for hardware expansion card to be connected. We also have the ribbon cables. Devices attached to the motherboard do so by the use of the ribbon cables. Here is an example of a ribbon cable. I know you have all come across such a cable. The Central Processing Unit, CPU. CPU can be defined as a multi-purpose register-based clock-driven, programmable tiny silicon chip. As seen in the diagram, this is the electronic chip called the CPU. The CPU controls and coordinates operations of a computer system based on the instructions given to it. As seen in the diagram, the CPU is carefully placed in its socket in the motherboard, and it's very protected. Power supply unit. Power supply unit is another example of internal hardware. The power supply unit converts the mains alternative current to low voltage regulated direct current or power for the internal components of a computer. It's simply the source of power for a computer. Internal memory. In internal memory, we have the read-only memory and the random access memory. The RAM and the ROM are used to store computer data. As seen in the diagram, the ROM is mounted on the motherboard, while the RAM is fixed in the expansion slot available on the motherboard. Let's leave this for another video where we learn the difference between ROM and RAM in depth. The cooling fan. The CPU cooling fan is very necessary. We all know that the computer processor produces a lot of heat as it performs its function. That's where the cooling fan comes in. Its main function is to dissipate the heat produced and maintain the computer's cooling system. Now it works to increase the life of a computer. It reduces the chances of the computer overheating, and this protects the computer from damage. Sound and graphics card. This is a sound card and this is a graphic card. Now, what is the work of a sound card? A sound card is an expansion card that allows the computer to send audio information to an audio device, for example the speakers and a pair of headphones. On the other side, we have the graphics card. A graphics card is also called a video card or a display card. It is used for displaying high quality graphics at a high rate of speed. In the modern society, due to the high development of computing, most computers include the graphics card. They have improved graphics card for video games and heavy work such as video and photo editing. Now, video and photo editing can be done by use of the application software such as the Adobe Photoshop, and this is possible by the use of the graphics card. Disk drives. Disk drives, for example, the hard disk drives, optical disk drives, and the magnetic disk drives. These are non-volatile memory devices used to permanently store and retrieve computer data, such as operating system, applications, documents, personal files, and so on. These have a large storage capacity and they are measured in gigabits or terabytes. The CMOS chip and the cooling fins. Let's start with the CMOS chip. The CMOS chip is a small battery as seen in the above photo. The CMOS chip is a small battery typically used to keep system time and clock settings and other important hardware settings. It also stores information of the computer. On the other side, we have the heat sink cooling fins. The heatsink cooling fins are made of aluminum. They are used in computers to cool the CPU or the GPUs, that is the graphics processors. After going through the internal hardware, we also have the external hardware. What is an external hardware? It is simply the hardware found outside the system unit. External devices are added to the computer system by plugging them in to ports on the back of the computer. Now, the external devices are also called the peripheral devices. They are connected to the computer via ports. Now, the ports are the point of attachment. They are the point of connection between the computer and its peripheral devices. Some of the common peripheral devices we know are the mouse, the keyboard, the monitor, the display unit, printers, speakers, and flash drives. Those are some of the peripheral devices we know. External devices or external hardware are broken down into three. We have the input devices, the output devices, and the storage devices. Let's look into them one by one. We have the input devices. Input devices refers to any device used to enter information into a computer from an external source. For example, the mouse, keyboard, microphone, scanner, touchscreen, and joystick. These are some of the input devices. Output devices. Output devices communicate information to the end user in a usable form. In short, they present the output to the user, the useful information to the user for decision making. Such devices include the printers, headphones, monitors, and speakers, among others. Storage devices. Storage devices are used to hold or store user data. For example, we have the hard disk, the optical disk, the flash disks, the solid state disk, the SSD, and the memory card. Those are some of the storage devices. Now, what have you learned today? Have you learned something new? You will mind to take a pen and a paper and ask yourself some of these questions, like, can you define computer hardware? Can you? Can you differentiate between internal and external hardware? Can you also define an expansion slot? What is an expansion slot? Or what is a port? And can you give the difference between the input and output or storage devices? Can you identify that this is an input device, this is an output device, and this is a storage device. Well, all said and done, we have come to the end of this video, and in our next video we will concentrate on the computer software, which is another component of computing. Thanks for watching. Let us spread computing. Please like, subscribe, and share. Bye.